good, Anderson family? How you guys doing? I'm Broderick Anderson,
I'm Yasmin Anderson,
and you are
hanging
hanging
with
with
the
the
Andersons.
Andersons.
What's up, guys? We're back. I know it's been a while since we last recorded. It's been almost a month, and we have an explanation. Unfortunately, we've had quite a few events happen.
Yes, we do.
Hurricane Florence was supposed to touch down. We actually did not get affected. Well, no, we did get affected by it to a certain degree with the rain. But the rain turned into us having several tornadoes.
Tornadoes.
As of now, the accurate count was 9. So, yeah.
That threw us off for a while too, guys. So we just coming back. Yeah.
Also, we wanted to apologize to you guys about having to postpone our couples challenge. We will be doing it, but we have to kind of regroup. We have been going through some stuff lately,
Some challenges.
some challenges, and actually, that's what our story time is going to be about today. We're going to talk about how undealt with grief can affect your marriage.
Yes, it can. As a fact, if you really doesn't deal with it in the proper way in a marriage, it can affect you where um, I want to say maybe the love for your spouse or your significant other could be lacking in certain areas and the other one don't understand what's going on, and if you don't talk about it, it actually causes more problems because it can be attitudes, and it's not even something they did to you, it's what you're dealing with, and you have more pressure on top of that you know
It has a way of driving a wedge if you aren't careful. So we just wanted to, one, let you guys know that we aren't going anywhere.
we're here to stay.
We're here to stay. But real life happens, and that's what this channel is about. We wanted to be honest with you guys. We are also in one of the biggest transitions of our lives right now. So we've had quite an eventful year. It started out rough in many ways than one, but we want to be honest, and we also wanted to talk about how grief shows up sometimes. Like my husband was saying, sometimes it shows up in anger, sometimes it shows up with you shutting down, sometimes it shows up in just raw emotion,
Yeah.
crying,
Yeah.
being frustrated.
Yeah.
And if I'm honest, the last couple of weeks have been quite difficult because of
For you.
grief. I mean, there's no other way to explain it. When you don't get to properly deal with it, or you don't talk about it, trauma is very real. This month is Suicide Prevention Month, and
Yes, it is.
It's been rough.
We're going to talk about the issues of the issue of suicide. It can really place a big toll on life. A lot of people deal with depression, and when you deal with depression, if you don't talk about it, if you don't have anybody to help you through it, it will bring on that suicidal nature out of you.
Yeah, depression is very real. For a good amount of years, I dealt with depression. It started when I was about 13. And I didn't really start getting help for it until like a couple of years ago. And it showed up in my life in very dangerous, dark ways and very reckless ways.
Yes, it did.
And it has taken a toll over the years of just not dealing with stuff. 2000, and this is a very vulnerable moment, 2014, I attempted to commit suicide. because I was depressed. Um, Things were just at a low for me. I struggled a lot in my health, and I also want to, talk about that again one day, but not going into that today. But I was diagnosed with some chronic illness, something that I'll live with for the rest of my life. And people who deal with chronic illnesses and chronic pain, where there's no cure and medicine doesn't help, it's very easy to drop into depression. It's very easy to feel like you have no outing. It's very easy to feel like just taking yourself out is the best option. And I was at a low place, and one day I decided to try and take um, 3 bottles worth of pain medicine.
Different pain medicine.
Different pain medicine. And my husband was at work, and I called him and told him that I loved him and that I would always love him. And I sat down on my couch and started to go unconscious.
She called me and, like I said, it's a vulnerable moment, excuse me. She called me and I didn't pick up the phone the first time, but I called back and she kept saying, I love you, I'd always love you. And I was like, what's going on? Something didn't sound right, something didn't feel right. And at the time, we didn't have transportation. We being honest. At the time, we didn't have
We were at a
transportation.
low.
We was at a low point in our life. We didn't have transportation. I was taking the city bus back and forth to work, and I knew something didn't sound right. So I wound up calling some people, and and then wound up calling my pastor at the time and said, I don't know what's going on, but something don't sound right with Yasmin. She's at the house. Can you guys get there? Thank God that my pastor and family lived like less than 5 minutes away from us.
They lived around the corner from us.
Yeah, lived right corner from us, and she sent the deacon and the evangelist to the house, and they was there by the time I got there. And a co-worker of mine, I thank God for him. He asked me what was going on, and I told him. He asked me to have ways to get back home, and I told him I said I gotta wait for the bus. He was like, "No, I'm gonna take you," and a whole bunch of stuff transpired, with my manager. Um, Wanted to say he wanted to let me go because I had to leave work early, but my supervisor at the time took over that, got me to the house, and the sight that I saw was like, it was a scary sight because I knew she was dealing with stuff, but I didn't know to the great extent of how she was dealing with it. That's why I say you have to talk, you have to communicate with your significant other so they can be there to help you.
Yes, that's very important. I had completely shut down. I had went into withdrawal. I was sleeping all the time. I was so unenthused, so unengaged, and just highly agitated and frustrated with life. Like I said, at that time in our life, we were barely making ends meet. Like, my husband and I know what it's like to have lost everything. Like, lost our car, lost our home, and jobs, like get laid off a job. I remember being so sick to the point where one of my managers said, well, if you can't effectively do your job, then that means that you probably need to quit. And right after that, they had started looking for a replacement for me. There was no compassion of, let's see what we can do. How can we help? How can we make it easier? So it was a really low place. I was really struggling in my identity. I didn't know who I was. I felt like a complete failure. I was struggling in school. We were struggling financially. I was trying to get on disability, and
it was just a lot going on, guys.
It was a lot going on, and the straw that kind of broke the camel's back was I had applied for disability. And with disability, anybody that's ever applied for disability, you cannot work while you're applying, because that definitely lessens your chance of getting on. And so my husband currently was the only one working, and the job that he worked, it was better than no job at all, but he didn't even make enough money to cover our rent. And I was waiting to hear back from disability, and I received the letter, and the letter said, unfortunately, we are denying you for your disabilities. And at this point, bills were just stacking up, stacking up, stacking up. I had recently just been diagnosed with a very, to me, it was a detrimental circumstances. I am still alive to tell the story, but at that time, I felt like I had there was nothing. Like, where was my life going? And I did not communicate that to him. I did not communicate how I was feeling. I think he had a nuance that I wasn't happy, but I don't think he understood to what extent I wasn't happy. And I wasn't trying to blame him because it wasn't his fault, the circumstance that we were in, but it was definitely a low place of feeling like we won't ever recover from this.
But we did. We recovered from that. God brought us out of that. And days transpired as years to come. Um, and this is why we're making this video talking about grief. And if you don't deal with it within your marriage, it can cause very I can't even pronounce the word. Uh, it can cause really bad things to happen. Put it that way.
Yeah. So after that incident, we had to start having those conversations. I had to start being honest enough to say I'm not happy, and I had to go really searching for why I wasn't, and it couldn't be his fault. And I had to learn that, like, my happiness couldn't stem from the lack thereof, from necessarily somebody else not being in control of the circumstances that were dealt to us. So there was more of an accountability thing. I did start talking with and receiving counseling, to kind of deal with the emotions of everything that I was going through, and I had to learn that yes, this is difficult. Yes, this is something that I will, I claim healing every day. But the realities of it is, this is a condition that I will live with for the rest of my life. Will I lay down and let it take control of me?
Nah.
Or will I decide to say, okay, there's going to be bad days, but I'm still going to decide to rise up. I'm still going to decide to fight. I'm still going to decide to have a life. I'm still going to make the efforts to do whatever I can to be okay with where my life was in that moment. And that's when things begin to change ultimately. And it was well needed because life didn't stop. Stuff still kept happening.
Yes,
and I had to learn to cope and to deal with those things. And I remember feeling, like, Yasmin, you've got to begin to take control back over your life and over your emotions. Like, it's hard, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to make it seem like it was like an overnight thing. It was a slow process of learning to change the way I saw things, learning to change the way I view things, and learning to understand and accept that everything in life is not going to be peachy keen, but that doesn't mean that I have to quit every time life gets hard.
That's it.
And unfortunately, some people don't have that support system. I thank God that God began to give me that support system. God began to place people in my life to say, you know what, girl, I understand. I ain't feel like getting out of bed today either. But guess what? We're going to get up out this bed and we're going to do something. God began to deal and press upon my husband's heart to say, I would lay in the bed days at a time. Like, lay in the bed. He would go to work because I wasn't working. And at that time, because of me being sick, I had to go on sabbatical from school. So I wasn't working. I wasn't going back to school. I physically could not do those things. And I was over it. Like he would go to work, I'd be laying in the bed. He would come home, I'd be laying in bed. Like I would get up long enough to make sure that dinner was cooked, and I would literally climb back in the bed. And I remember him coming home one day and ripping the covers off of me and said, "Enough is enough. Like, you will not lay in this bed another day. You will not act like your life is so terrible, Yasmin. No, it's not fair," because I felt like life wasn't fair. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why I was going through the stuff that I was going through. I felt like I was dealt an unfair hand, and it just absolutely wasn't fair. And he was like, "You are absolutely right." But guess what? Guess how many other people were not dealt the best hand? Guess what else? They're not acting all like this. They've picked themselves up. It's okay to be frustrated, but pick yourself back up. It's okay to cry, but pick yourself back up. Don't stay there. Don't stay stuck. And he was like, "Today it ends. Like, I don't know what we have to do, but it ends today. Like, no more. Enough is enough."
Yeah, when you see it as a man or as a woman, whichever first, be sick or whatever, you see your spouse dealing with that, it does take a toll on you because you're looking like, okay, what is it can I do to make them feel better? What is it I can do to make the load lighter or whatever? And I had to realize, that it really wasn't nothing I could do physically. Like, I couldn't take her sickness from her. But me being that pushing person, be like that I am, that no, we're not doing this. This right here must cease. We get out of bed, we can walk, we can talk, we can sit up and watch TV, but you're not laying back in the bed. And like I said, we didn't have a car, so it was nothing for me to say we're gonna catch the bus somewhere and walk. We're gonna catch the bus to the library. We're gonna do something. But see, most people think that it takes a whole lot of money to try to get your spouse out of the funk that is. It's not that. It's just showing them, hey, I know what you're going through. I see this, but we're not going to let this stop us. We're going to get up. We're going to do something.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what it boiled down to. I literally started making the conscious effort to want to live again. Some days I got it right, and some days I utterly failed. But in the same breath, I didn't stop trying. I began to understand, to be grateful, and to find happiness in the little things. And that's where my joy started coming back. I started, beginning to understand that, my life is important. And I think that's the thing about it. Somebody can tell you all the days of your life that your life is important, but until you realize that your life is important, until you actually believe that your life is important, it didn't matter how many times anybody said it. I had to begin to think it for myself that I don't understand any of this. I don't know why any of this has happened, but my life is important. My life matters. And if I'm willing to understand and look past that something else is coming after this, then let me press a little harder. And I'm so glad, fast forwarding now, I'm so glad that I did. I'm so glad that I decided to understand that life goes beyond the bad moments that we have. Yes, they will happen. Yes, they will occur. But there's something on the other side of that. And now, fast forwarding to present day, it still doesn't mean that I don't struggle with stuff. It's just that I handle it a little bit better. And I'm not so quick to want to quit. And I understand that even in rough seasons, that God still is the lifter of my head. And I really had to press into my faith. I really began to have sincere conversations with God. I really began to say, Lord, if you don't transform my mind, if you don't transform the way that I think, the way that I process stuff, I will utterly fail, and that's what he began to do. He began to challenge the way I thought about myself, the way I viewed myself, the way I viewed my worth, because I thought it was all wrapped up in the position or a title or what I was doing or what I was accomplishing, and that if I hadn't accomplished those things, that I was a failure. And I had to realize that that's not the truth. Like, even now with the where our life is right now, there's so many more things that I want to accomplish, but I understand now that those are a part of who I am. They don't make up who I am. I understand that, whether I have a college degree or I don't have a college degree, that I'm still important,
That's
that
right.
I'm still
That's right.
somebody,
That's right.
that I still am able to have a life, that I'm still able and I'm still blessed beyond measures, and that
That's
God
right.
still provides for
That's
me.
right.
Is it difficult at times? Yes. Would it
Yes.
be easier if I had those things in place? Absolutely. But in the same breath, I know what it's like to have nothing and God provide and tap somebody's heart and say, go take this to them. I will never forget. We had just moved into our home. We were newly married. We had no food. When I say no food, like, we used all our money to get the place that we were living in. And I remember sitting thinking, like, oh, what are we going to do for dinner? Like, we don't have any food. We don't really have that much money. How we gonna eat?
I can
And
tell you one thing about me. My wife can tell you, not to cut you off, my wife can tell you, I see the glass half full all the time.
Absolutely.
All the time. My wife can sit there and she's like, babe, da 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 da. I'm like, okay, God's going to provide. He's going to show us a way out of this. And she always looked at me like, you always say that. I said, because he does. He does. He always shows us a way out. I mean, it seems like, you get yourselves in something and it seems like you don't see a way out. But if you have somebody that's there with you to help push, you'd be like, babe, look, keep faith, keep praying. God got us, God got us. And he has never failed us yet.
And he hasn't. But, I was standing in the kitchen and I was just like, okay, Lord, like, you got this. And not even like 5 minutes later, a knock came on the door and somebody had groceries and a whole list of other stuff and things that we needed for, to make it until the next time one of us got paid. And it was those moments that began to build my faith.
Yes.
It was those moments that began to solidify,
yes.
If God's word doesn't lie, it doesn't come back void, and that God said that he'll supply our need. Like, sometimes we confuse wants with needs.
He just has to supply your wants. He just has to supply your needs.
We get mad when he doesn't give us what we want, when ultimately, as long as he provides what you need, at the end of the day, if you have a roof over your head, if you have food to eat, if you have, you have peace in your mind, peace in your heart, and you know that you're following and you're living the best life according to what God has mandated, then he's going to provide for you. I mean, he's going to open doors for you. And it's just some seasons you just have to learn to be able to ride the tides. And that's what we're learning to do. We haven't perfected it. But we're learning to ride the hard tides. And if I'm honest, we've had a lot of hard tides. Even last year was one of the hardest tides that we had to learn to ride. Last year, October, on a Friday evening, I received a phone call that...
Right. You was not to cut you off, sorry about that. She received a phone call that her mom had passed. She was asleep and the phone rung, and when the person answered the phone, when we answered the phone, I kind of heard it in a person's voice, and I was like, I just told the wife, I said, give me the phone, let me talk to them. And the person delivered the message. Wasn't, you know how you have some people that's blunt, straight to the point? It was like straight to the point that, oh, your mom passed. Me personally, I felt like...
Well, she wasn't nonchalant about it. It was she clearly was emotional because I was asleep and I was woken up to her screaming in my ear, "Your mom is dead. Your mom is dead. You need to hurry up and get to my house because your mom is dead. Your mom just died." And
As far as we know, we was on the way. I jumped up and I got her straight, and we was on the way down there to her house, and she called back again, and she was like, "Where are you? Where are you? They want to take the body. They want to take the body." And I took the phone. I said, "Look, right now, I don't need you talking to the wifey. Talk to me. Let me know what's going on." I said, "Because this is her mother. This is not my mother, but this is her mother. She don't need to be hearing this. I will get her there as soon as possible." And when we got there, she had to identify the body, and it was a tough one for her, but she did it. She did it.
it was one of the most
Hardest times of her life. It was one of the most hardest times of her life because she is the only child, and to have to identify. Now I can't say I know what it's like to have to identify a body like that, but have to identify that your mom laying on the floor dead, and it's nothing you can do. I know it seemed like it literally took the life out of her body, but God allowed her to be able to do that and bounce back. And it's hard. It's hard, and I know this video was gonna be very tough because coming up this October, it's gonna be a year, and for her to even talk about it shows strength.
and that's part of the reason why we wanted to do the video also was because we were missing, and it's important to talk about those things because grief showed right back up again. And if I'm honest, I it was like all those raw emotions of like 2014 came flooding back into my life of um, everything just kind of fell in my lap. My mom was the caretaker for her brother who has an intellectual disability. She was taking care of my grandfather, and she was ultimately taking care of my grandmother. They all three of them lived with her, and so when she passed, there was there were people, but ultimately there was no one. I ended up having to make arrangements and figure out what our next steps was going to have to be. So I didn't get a chance to grieve, if I'm honest. There was I had to make so many decisions so fast, as far as what was going to happen with my mom's body, how were we going to put her away, and that was stressful in itself. Making decisions for my grandfather, where he was going to ultimately live, what was going to happen with my uncle, were we going to keep him, were we going to put him somewhere, what was going to happen with my grandmother. Now I thank God that my grandmother has other children. My uncle, so it was my uncle, my mom, and then my grandmother's youngest son, who is my uncle, but we were raised together as siblings. So I don't say that he's my uncle, I say that he's my brother. And he was there to say, we're going to band together as far as, making sure that our grandmother was going to be okay. Before my mom passed away, she asked if I would look out after my uncle. So I now had a newfound role of being responsible for somebody. And I didn't know how to properly care for him. My uncle, he could, he's able to dress himself, feed himself, all those things, but mentally he's not able to do some things. So it's pretty much like having a grown adult child to be responsible for. And so it was rough. Like this year has, having to learn to what to do, the proper things, because you want to take care of them the best way you know how. And there were times that I felt like I utterly failed doing it. But I wouldn't take anything back from the experience of it, because I know for some reason there's a reason why I've experienced this. There's a reason why God decided at this time, at this juncture, that He would allow my mom to be taken away. And but I didn't get to properly grieve because I was so worried about making sure that everything else was still held together until it all began to fall apart these last couple of weeks. But it was because I didn't deal with it that everything just began to crumble. Of the further away it was, it didn't bother me as much. But the closer it's gotten, the more it has become a consuming thought of, there were still moments that I would cry, but I would have to wipe my face, get up, and keep it moving, because somebody needed to be taken care of, something needed to be done. And the last 2 weeks, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't act like
it don't exist.
It didn't exist. If there was a huge elephant in the room, and I was acting like I didn't see it, and it began to show. It began to form in my body. Like, stress in your body takes a toll on your body. And for somebody who has chronic illnesses, your body will begin to shut down if you don't deal with stuff properly. And that's ultimately what began to happen. I started shutting down. I started physically, mentally, emotionally just shutting down. And I was able to recognize it for what it was. And then I was able to begin to deal with it. And that's what I've taken the time to do. So some of our brief sabbatical has been me learning to deal properly with grief.
Even though, you could deal properly with grief, but I'll be honest with you, it would never just up and leave. Most people think, if I deal with it, I talk about it, I cry it out, it's going to always leave. No, it's not going to leave. Because I want to say back in 97, I lost my father, and I was 16. And now that I'm 38, that I'm 38, it's still wrenches with me every time November comes around. It sits there, and my wife tells you I'm quick to tell everybody else to deal with their stuff. I'm quick to tell everybody else to talk about what they talk about what they need to talk about. Let's go do something. Let's go do this. Come on, we go. I'm always uplifting everybody else, but when November come around, I'm more. My wife can tell you, I'm more like.
Well, no, not anymore. Now, previous times when November would come around, it was hard. Like, when I say we would argue like the whole month of November. We would argue because he would be on such edge. And in the beginning, when I would be like, well, talk about it, he would be like, I don't want to talk about it. I was like, well, you need to talk about it. Well, I don't want to talk about it because this is the way I deal with it. And it was after I tried to commit suicide that we began to change the narrative of how we dealt with stuff. Like, there was no more, I don't want to talk about it. Like, even if that meant that you had to scream about it, cry about it, whatever it was that you needed to do to get it out, that was healthy. That was healthy.
Let's be real. Healthy.
Because some people don't express themselves healthily. So, but after that moment, we begin to take the time out. So we do, when it gets closer to, and we begin to do that for me this year, since my mom passed away last year. But the month before, leading up to, we always kind of have go through those raw emotions. And we also now, there's a sensitivity there now, if I'm honest, because I'm on that same side of, it wasn't that I wasn't sensitive before. I just couldn't identify. which made it more difficult because in my mind I'm thinking, okay, I understand you're sad, but I'm gonna need you to work through your emotions, and we're gonna work through them in a positive way. Like, you're not gonna be snapping at me, and then boom, it happened to me, and I understood why he was snapping. If I'm honest, like, I understood the thoughts in his mind at those times. So there's a new level of sensitivity there to understand when somebody's grieving. And I think the worst thing that you can do is to tell someone how to grieve,
yes,
and how long they should grieve.
Yes, you can't do that.
Don't get me wrong.
You can't do that.
There are moments that you have to, like that moment when my husband came back and snatched them covers up off me and was like, get up from here. But he also was loving about it. He didn't allow me to wallow in it, but he was loving about it. There are some people who will say to you, I can't believe that you're still honestly grieving about that. Or how long are you gonna wallow in that? And I think that's wrong for you to do to people. I don't think that you should do that. I think that if you don't know how to handle it, stay away from them, honestly.
Do it at time. That's it.
If you can't say a prayer for them, just let them go.
Yeah.
Just let them be, and let them, don't damage people. And sometimes we have a habit of wounding those because we feel like they should be over already what it was, whatever it is. There's some people, now don't get me wrong, there's some people that live in these cycles and they have to want to come out of them. But then there's some people, they just don't know how to.
So you gotta be considerate, you gotta have a heart, you gotta have love to help that person come out of that situation, because you telling the person, I'm not trying to be funny, the person could have passed 6 months ago, you come back, oh, it's 6 months now, you should be up and over that. All you doing is tearing that person down even more. You're making them feel bad even more. So just, if you, like my wife said, if you don't know what to say, if you don't know how to
just don't say nothing.
Don't say nothing. Go away, say a prayer for them. Call and check on them every once in a while. Say, hey, I just here, let you know I'm here if you need to talk to me. Sometimes just a phone call helps. Sometimes just come back and say, hey, I want to take you out helps. Just redirecting their thought patterns helps. But some people don't.
And sometimes just listening to what they have to say. I think the first 3 months were extremely hard for me when my mom first passed. Like, I literally woke up every morning crying, like hysterically in like anxiety, panic, crying. Like, I would be asleep, the thought would cross my mind, I would wake up hollering and screaming and crying. And the one thing I loved about my husband was he let me have those moments. I know it was hard for him to see me in that light, but he let me have those moments. He didn't say, girl, hush up all of that. Don't be doing all of that. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. He let me. He said, if you want to cry, cry. If you want to be upset, be upset. He let me allowed me to feel the raw emotions of that, which then helped me to get up afterwards. Because the first 3 months, if I didn't cry, I wasn't getting out of bed.
Yeah, that's true.
If I didn't have a moment where I was able to say, this isn't fair, I wasn't able to function. And so I know that those were the moments that kind of helped to get me to the point where I wasn't crying every day. But he never scorned me or made me feel bad about crying. He never, when I would get frustrated, he was like, you want to cry? like he would literally ask me, and sometimes I would get so mad at him, and I would be like, no, I don't want to cry. But I wanted to cry. And just the fact of the matter that he gave me permission to do that, it really helped. It really helped.
Because, in fact, I know what it was like to want to cry and you can't cry. Because when my dad passed at the age of 16, I had to man up. I had to man up, and I had to make sure that my sister was okay, and in that process of manning up, a lot of times that I might want to shed tears, I couldn't. A lot of times that I want to cry in front of people, I couldn't. So whenever I was alone, you know, and away from everyone, that was my time to cry, to break down, to just lash out. I mean, because I had so much anger built up, and that's what I didn't want it for my wife. I didn't want her to go through the anger that I went through because I couldn't do the normal things. I couldn't grieve the way I should have grieved. So I would lash out. I was mad. I was angry. I was disrespectful to adults, and that wasn't even my character. And it was just I saw myself going in a downhill spiral. And it took some people to come and talk with me and get me to be like, it's okay to cry. It's okay to grieve. So do it. So when my wife experienced, her mom passing, I had to allow her to go through that raw emotions so she wouldn't have that much built up anger. So when somebody says just a little thing that might irritate her, she wouldn't snap off or fly off at somebody.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's important that you have to have these conversations. There's makeup on this, but if
No,
you
thank
want to, I was trying to be polite.
No, thank you.
But, but I think these are the important conversations as a married couple that you should have. The most vulnerable person that you should be vulnerable in front of is your spouse.
That's right.
And there's
And I had
a
a problem
problem.
with that.
Yes. And there's a huge problem when you cannot be vulnerable with your spouse, and everything. So
Keep talking. I got you.
apparently I have tissue on my face. But and tissue on my hair, and
It fell in your hair. Still on your face. It just don't want to leave you. Excuse me.
Okay.
Get that.
well,
All right, now I got it.
alrighty. Now that I don't have tissue on my face, I've probably done half of this video with tissue on my face, but that's okay because it's real, it's raw, it's us. We wanted to give you guys an explanation why we haven't been filming in a while because we've been dealing with life, but we are back. We will not be taking, Lord willing, we will not be planning on taking any more breaks.
No more sabbatical breaks.
No more sabbatical breaks. But we wanted to give you guys a little bit of insight. We want to be real with you guys. We want to build a community of real people who deal with real life issues, and that when they happen, that we talk about them, we confront them, and that we learn to live triumphantly through the testimonies of things that we've overcome. So comment down below if there's anything that you guys would like for us to discuss further, whether about this topic of grief, suicide, communication, even if you just want us to pray with you guys. We believe in the power of prayer.
Yes, we do.
We have definitely seen it transform our life.
And can transform your life.
Yes, it definitely can transform your life as well. And we promise that the next video will not be as somber. We will go back to, doing some more challenges.
Oh, God.
I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope that our sharing and opening up and being vulnerable with you today helps somebody. There is help out there.
Yes, it is.
Please do not feel like you have to do it all on your own.
But you don't.
And that you are alone. There's a community. We are building a community. Allow us to help you guys and allow us to be your community. So we look forward to hearing back your feedback. If you do not follow us on Instagram, please don't forget it is at hang_with the Andersons. We also have a Facebook page, actually, Hanging with the Andersons. So check us out there as well. And until next time,
you've been
Hanging with the Andersons. Bye.